So I've got a fun, easy project for you guys today. We're making a wooden whistle. This is something you can finish in probably a couple hours. In fact, you could probably make a few of them in a couple hours. I'm using basic tools. The wood is free. You just got to go find a stick. It's practical in that it fits in your pocket when you're done. And I also made this cool lanyard to go with it. It's called a snake knot. Now, I'm not a knot guy or anything, but I figured I'd show you guys how to do this anyways, so that you could make one yourself. And I almost forgot, I will have plans available on Patreon with all the tiny little measurements you're going to need to make. So first things first, you're going to need a stick. And the diameter you're looking for is somewhere between 5/8 of an inch and 3/4 of an inch. Now, as you can see, I went to the beach to collect some driftwood for this project, but you can go to the forest or your backyard or wherever you want. You are, however, going to have to make sure that you dry them thoroughly after you collect them. As you can see, I collected these in the middle of winter when there was still snow on the ground. And I may or may not have tricked my wife into joining me for this twig hunt.
My wife is ready to go. She's calling me. Enough picking for now.
So now that you've got a nice dry stick, it's ready to start cutting. And for this, I'm just using a handsaw, and I'm going to be cutting a piece that is 3 inches long. Once I have that, I'm going to clamp it in my vise, and I'm going to drill a hole down the center of it, 2 inches deep. And I'm using a 5/16 inch drill bit. I did my best to eyeball this and make sure it went straight down the center. It actually wasn't too difficult. And you can see that I've marked my drill bit with some masking tape so that I know how deep to go. After that, I took a ruler and I made 2 marks on the side of my stick, one at 1/2 inch and the other at 1 1/8. And basically this is where I'm going to cut that wedge piece out of the whistle, and I think it's also known as the window or the ramp of a whistle. I'm not 100% sure, but the part that makes noise. Anyhow, at the 1/2 inch mark, you're going to take your saw and you're going to cut about halfway through the stick. In fact, I'd probably recommend a little less than halfway through. Once that's done, you're going to take your carving knife and you're going to start carving down at an angle from the mark that we made at 1 1/8 inches. And I think this part's pretty self-explanatory. Just keep carving away until you've got this nice angle that goes right to the bottom of the cut that you made at the 1/2 inch mark. Now, one thing I've noticed when I do this is I usually end up with a bunch of little straggly, hairy bits in there, and they're kind of hard to cut out, but I figured out a little trick. If you just poke them inwards with your knife, you can then take your drill bit, stick it in the hole, and just spin it by hand, and it basically just clips all those little pieces right off, and it really cleans it up. The smaller whistle on the left is one that I made a few months ago in preparation for this video, and you can tell it just doesn't look as nice, so I'm glad I figured this out. It really cleaned it up nicely. So I'm going to explain this next part as I go, because I think it'll be a little bit easier to do rather than explaining it after the fact. We're going to make this whistle now by sticking a dowel in there. So I've got a couple of dowels here, one pine, one cedar. I'm going to try cedar today, and I actually made my own dowel. If you want to check out that video, I've got this interesting way of making them with a nut. Anyways, little side quest there for you guys if you're interested. So the first thing you're going to do, you're going to take your dowel, same size as this hole, of course. You're just going to shave a little flat spot in the end, and that's about 3/4 of an inch long. And I've got one right here that works, so I'll just flip it here so you can see it. I shaved down, I measured it with my trusty little calipers here, and it was about 2 millimeters deep. I know I'm switching between imperial and metric there, but that's okay. So about 2 millimeters, And this will slide right into here. And I noticed that there's a lot of videos out there that say slide this in until it's flush with this edge over here. But that's not 100% accurate. I feel like it's better to adjust how deep it goes based on how it sounds. And sometimes I need to go in a little bit further, and sometimes I have to actually not go as far. For example, with this other whistle that I made here, you can see that I actually had to pull it back a little bit, so it's not quite reaching the edge at all. And it's probably because the hole's a lot smaller than this one. So let me show you how I do that. It's actually pretty simple. Let's just start with the edge so I can give you an example of what it sounds like. I'll push it to the edge and make sure that it's parallel here. You don't want it twisted like that, so just bring that back here like this. And let's just test that out there. So you can hear it's trying to make some noise there, but it's not quite as peppy as this one here. So all you gotta do is move it a little bit further in. I've got a line there, so I know how far I need to go, but let's just test it out at this point here. Sounding better already. And let's just push it right into that line, because I know that's the sweet spot for this one. Make sure it's parallel. Looks pretty good. All right. Much better. So that is where I'm going to glue this bad boy in. So just a little wood glue here goes a long ways. I'm using Titebond 3. Slide it in there. Make sure everything's lined up properly and it's parallel with the ramp, and you're good to go. I let it dry for about half an hour, then trim down the excess. And now it's time to make this thing go from this to this. But before that, I was curious to know how long it would take me to get a functioning whistle up until this point. So I decided to make a second one and time myself this time. I wanted to do that because normally when I'm filming, I really don't know how long it takes me to make something, because I'm always having to stop and start and move my camera around and whatnot. And yeah, I was just really curious to know how long this would take to make. And surprisingly, it only took 9 minutes. So there you go, 9 minutes to get to this point here. I think that's pretty good. And then if you want to do all the rest of the carving and the lanyard and whatnot, that's going to take extra time, of course, but it's going to make it look a lot better and feel a lot more comfortable when using it. So this part is somewhat self-explanatory. You can probably eyeball most of it, but I will have measurements on the plans that I'm making, and I'll have those plans available on Patreon. I will eventually make a website of some kind where you guys can just buy from there. I think that might be easier. I'm not sure, but I haven't set it up yet. But Patreon is working for now. Anyhow, carving out the mouthpiece, nice and easy. Carving the other end for the lanyard, also pretty easy. This wood was actually kind of hard though. I don't know why it was so hard. I thought this was like soft pine or something, but I think it's something else. I'm not quite sure though. Usually when I'm dealing with driftwood, it's kind of soft. And I expected this to be much softer, but it wasn't. Still worked out though. Looks great. And I gotta say, I really like the way this turned out. So now it is time for the lanyard. I'm using Paracord here, and obviously I drilled a hole through this as well. And I am going to attempt to teach you how to make a snake knot. So here goes nothing. The cord that I'm using is 30 inches long. I'm going to fold it in half, and then I'm going to start by taking the left side, bringing it over the right, and under, and making sure it's looped something like this. Now I'm going to take the right one, I'm going to put it underneath this one, over and through the loop right here. If you guys have to, go ahead and rewind that. Replay it as much as you need to. This is probably the most important part. And then I just cinch it all together, and that'll give us our first little stitch. Not gonna lie, I had to re-record that probably 5 times. All right, so the first one's done there. Now I'm gonna flip everything around this way. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm going to loosen off this side over here on the left. So I get a little loop like that. And I'm just gonna switch hands and hold it with my left hand. And for this part, you're always going to be wanting to deal with the piece of cord that's going through the loop there. So I'm going to take that, I'm going to bring it down, and I'm going to wrap it around my finger, kind of hold it with my thumb like that. And I'm going to put it through the loop. Once it's there, I'm just going to pull on the right side and cinch it up like that. Then we're left with something like this. Just going to flip it over, and then I'm essentially in the same position as I was just a second ago. So I've got that cord going through that loop. I'm going to bring it around my bottom finger, put it through this loop again, and cinch up the right side. All right. Flip it over. And do it again. Now it took me a few tries to get this right, but I eventually figured it out. I find the first few are the hardest, and it pretty much looks like you're doing something wrong, but it eventually comes together just fine. So you can see it coming along there. You're starting to see the pattern. So I'll just continue my way up here and finish this off. And once you get to the end, you just cinch everything up. Don't have to do anything differently. Just pull it tight and it'll hold itself together. So there you go, a snake knot. These whistles turned out great. But how do they sound? Well, I did some testing. And of course, I was a little too embarrassed to test these at home because I thought my neighbors would hear me. So I took a little ride in my truck. Now my camera was having trouble picking up just how loud these things were. I think it was automatically muting it down a little bit. So I got a decibel meter to measure exactly how loud these are. And there were some differences between the two whistles. So the first one I tested out was the one with the red lanyard. And we got up to 101 decibels with this one. Now that was really loud. It doesn't sound very loud on camera, but according to this, it's as loud as a subway train. Now the one with the beige lanyard, as soon as I tried this one out, I could tell before I even used the meter that this was significantly louder. Like it went from, oh, that's loud, to, ow, that's loud. And it came in at a whopping 104 decibels. Now you wouldn't think that 3 decibels would be noticeable audibly, but it actually was. Either way, I am happy with both of those results. So other than looking like a creep in my truck by myself tooting on my whistles, I think this project went really well. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Check out my plans on Patreon. Thank you to all my patrons who donate money to me. I really appreciate it, and it's a huge help. I will continue to make videos, and hopefully you guys will continue to find them interesting. All right, thanks for watching, guys, and see you next time.